The Supreme Court has just dropped a bombshell, and it's a massive victory for President Donald Trump. After months of speculation, debates, and legal back and forth, the nation's highest court has finally spoken, and the implications are enormous. This isn't just another ruling. This decision could reshape everything from upcoming elections to executive authority itself. Whether you support Trump or not, what just happened inside that marble building in Washington, D.C. will go down in political history. So buckle up, because in the next few minutes, we're breaking down what the court decided, how it happened, and what it means for the future of the country. Before we dive deeper into what this means for Trump, for the Republican Party, and for every American watching the news today wondering what comes next, do me a quick favor. So here's what actually happened, and why this victory is so much bigger than most people realize. A group of plaintiffs, concerned about food stamp payments known as SNAP benefits during the government shutdown, didn't file their lawsuit in Texas, Florida, or any other state. No, they strategically chose Rhode Island. Why Rhode Island? Because Rhode Island falls under the jurisdiction of the First Circuit Court of Appeals in Boston, which has earned a reputation as one of the most activist, anti-Trump circuits in the entire federal judiciary. They knew exactly what they were doing. Judge John McConnell, the Obama appointee handling the case, didn't disappoint their expectations. He issued an order commanding President Trump and his administration to fully fund SNAP benefits immediately, despite the fact that Congress had not appropriated the money due to the shutdown. Think about what that means for a second. Congress, the legislative branch with the constitutional power of the purse, was deadlocked. The government was shut down precisely because lawmakers couldn't agree on spending. Yet this single judge decided he could override that entire constitutional process and order the executive branch to spend money that the legislative branch never authorized. This isn't just judicial overreach. This is judicial chaos. Trump's legal team immediately appealed, and here's where it gets interesting. The First Circuit Court of Appeals, instead of quickly ruling on such an urgent matter, sat on their hands. They delayed. So the Solicitor General for the Trump administration, John Sauer, went straight to the Supreme Court asking for an emergency administrative stay, basically a pause button on this insane order. And guess who granted it initially? Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. Yes, the same justice appointed by Joe Biden actually saw how extreme this lower court ruling was and agreed to temporarily block it. That tells you something right there. When even a progressive justice thinks your order has gone too far, you've crossed a serious line. But the drama wasn't over. The Supreme Court gave the First Circuit another chance to reconsider their position. And what did those judges do? They doubled down. In a 29-page opinion, they argued that President Trump absolutely had to pay out these benefits, that he should raid funds from other programs if necessary, and they filled their legal reasoning with emotional appeals about hungry children and struggling families. Now, don't get me wrong. Nobody wants to see people go hungry. But here's the thing. Those arguments belong in Congress, not in a courtroom. Those are policy arguments you make to convince lawmakers to reopen the government and pass spending bills. They're not legal arguments that give judges the power to rewrite the Constitution and create money out of thin air. The First Circuit judges were acting like legislators, like policymakers, like political activists, not like impartial arbiters of the law. They were essentially saying that when democracy doesn't produce the outcome they want, when the elected representatives of the people can't agree on spending, then the unelected judges with lifetime appointments, have the authority to step in and impose their preferred policy outcome. This is exactly the pattern we've seen for decades with activist judges. When voters reject certain policies at the ballot box, when legislatures won't pass the laws that progressives want, the courts step in and discover brand new constitutional rights that nobody knew existed for 200 years. It's how we got judicial decisions on issues that should have been decided by the people and their elected representatives. And it's exactly what is happening here. These judges were trying to paint President Trump as the villain, as the heartless leader who would let people starve rather than... Trump wasn't refusing to help people. He was refusing to violate his constitutional oath. He was refusing to let judges dictate spending decisions that belong to Congress. He was standing up for the separation of powers that our founders designed to prevent exactly this kind of tyranny, and then came the Supreme Court's final ruling. In a brief but powerful order, the court extended the administrative stay, effectively freezing the lower court decisions and protecting President Trump from being forced to violate the Constitution. The order made it clear, this case is likely to become moot within days because the government is reopening, Congress is about to pass funding, and the money will flow through proper constitutional channels. But the message was unmistakable. The Supreme Court was telling activist judges everywhere that they cannot commandeer the presidency, they cannot rewrite the separation of powers, and they cannot impose their political preferences just because they disagree with the outcomes of the democratic process. Interestingly, Justice Jackson, who initially granted the stay, indicated she would not have extended at this time. That shift is curious and worth noting, but it didn't matter because the full court saw the bigger picture and ruled correctly. So what does this mean for President Trump and the Republican Party moving forward? First, it's another confirmation that Trump's appointments to the Supreme Court have fundamentally changed the judiciary. The court now has a solid originalist majority that interprets the Constitution based on its actual text and original meaning, not based on what judges wish it said. This means Trump and future Republican presidents have a Supreme Court that will act as a check against judicial activism, that will enforce the separation of powers, and that will prevent lower courts from turning into mini legislatures. Second, this case exposes just how far some judges are willing to go to resist Trump and advance progressive policies from the bench. Rhode Island wasn't chosen by accident. The First Circuit wasn't a coincidence. This was strategic forum shopping, looking for friendly judges who would rule based on politics rather than law. And even though they lost this time, you can bet they'll try again with different cases and different creative legal theories. Third, this victory strengthens Trump's hand in ongoing budget negotiations and government funding battles. The courts have now definitively said that judges cannot force the president to spend unauthorized funds, which means Trump and Republicans have more leverage in these standoffs. Democrats can't just run to friendly judges and get court orders forcing spending that Congress hasn't approved. They actually have to negotiate and compromise. Fourth, this case is going to be a rallying cry for Republican voters who are sick of activist judges trying to control the country. It's a clear example of why judicial appointments matter so much, why Trump's legacy of appointing originalist judges will impact America for generations, and why every election has consequences that extend far beyond just the presidency. But here's what really matters for the future. This battle isn't over. The left has spent decades building power through the courts, using lifetime appointed judges to advance policies they couldn't get through the ballot box or the legislature. Every time Republicans win elections, every time Trump gets a victory, you can expect lawsuits filed in carefully chosen jurisdictions in front of carefully selected judges who will do everything possible to stop conservative policies. The Supreme Court can only review a tiny fraction of cases, which means most lower court decisions stand. That's why Trump and future Republican presidents must continue prioritizing judicial appointments at every level, not just the Supreme Court. It's why Senate Republicans must confirm judges quickly and refuse to let Democrats obstruct the process. And it's why voters need to understand that when they elect a president, they're not just choosing one person, but potentially dozens or hundreds of judges who will shape American law for 30 or 40 years. The other big takeaway here is about the separation of powers in constitutional government. Our system only works when each branch stays in its lane. Congress makes laws and controls spending. The president executes those laws and manages the government. The courts interpret laws and resolve disputes. When judges start acting like legislators or trying to control the executive branch, the whole system breaks down. And that's exactly what these lower court judges were trying to do. They were trying to take power that the Constitution gives to Congress and the president and grab it for themselves. The Supreme Court just reminded them that's not how America works. We are a republic of laws, not a country ruled by judicial decree. So what happens next? In the immediate term, the government is reopening, the SNAP benefits will be funded through proper channels, and this particular case will fade away. But the larger war over judicial power and constitutional government continues. Trump has shown once again that he's willing to fight these battles all the way to the Supreme Court, that he won't back down when activist judges try to bully him into violating the Constitution, and that he has the legal team and the judicial appointments to win these fights. For the Republican Party, this is a template for the future. Stand firm on constitutional principles. Don't let media pressure or sympathetic stories push you into accepting judicial overreach. Appeal bad decisions quickly and aggressively, and trust that a properly constituted Supreme Court will do the right thing. For Democrats and the progressive movement, this is a wake-up call that their strategy of ruling through the courts is facing serious obstacles now that the Supreme Court has changed. They won't have to win elections and pass legislation the old-fashioned way, by actually convincing voters and building coalitions in Congress. And for every American who cares about constitutional government, This case is a reminder that the system still works when we have judges who respect the law rather than trying to impose their personal policy preferences. This wasn't just a victory for Trump. It was a victory for the Constitution, for the separation of powers, and for the idea that in America, we are governed by laws made by elected representatives, not by the political preferences of unelected judges. It's easy to get discouraged by all the lawsuits, all the resistance, all the activist judges trying to block every move Trump makes. But cases like this show that the system can still work, that good judges can still check bad judges, and that the Constitution is still strong enough to protect us from judicial tyranny. The fight is far from over. There will be more lawsuits, more activist judges, more attempts to use the courts to undo what voters decided at the ballot box. But for today, this is a win worth celebrating, a reminder that elections have consequences, and proof that Trump's presidency is reshaping the judiciary in ways that will protect constitutional government for decades to come. So here's my question for you. After seeing this case, after watching how activist judges tried to force Trump to violate the Constitution, and how the Supreme Court shut them down, what do you think should happen to judges who clearly overstep their authority like this? Should there be consequences for judicial overreach, or is the current system of appeals enough to correct these problems? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I really want to know what you think. And if you found this breakdown helpful, if you appreciate getting the real story without the spin and the bias, do me a favor and hit that like button right now. Share this video with your friends and family who need to understand what's really happening in our courts. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our breaking analysis when major news like this drops. The mainstream media won't tell you this story, but together we can make sure the truth gets out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.